What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It's Friday, February 26th, and the gang is back together. We got a mailbag episode coming up. You can also check out the NFC North Off-Season Priority Podcast with Jordan Najani. And if you want to hear Ryan Wilson and John Breech make fun of me for financial, I don't even know what it was. Ryan claimed I got fired, and Breech told me to go spend my money on a horse. And a horse documentary, you can do that. Of course, Mock Draft Monday coming up. We'll be live Sunday at 4 p.m. Go to youtube.com/pick6 if you want to join and chat with us throughout the course of that. And by now, you know all about CBS Sports HQ. But if you're new here, maybe thinking about cutting the cord or just need a quick refresher, well, CBS Sports HQ is your home for live 24/7 sports coverage, breaking news, game previews, highlights, you name it. It's for people like us, you and me, and all of our friends. And I want to let you know that every night at 6 p.m., the HQ team has the best cappers in the business on, and they are previewing and picking the night slate. It's the best way to make sure you have all the latest info and data before you bet. So come get that money. How do you watch? You can watch HQ on the CBS Sports app on your connected TV, computer, mobile phone. It's that easy, and it is free. All right, let's dive right into the mailbag. And we start with a question from a listener in... So I think he left this on Apple Podcasts. He lives in Seattle, getting pretty sick of the Seahawks running the ball all the time and wasting their handsome quarterback's prime years. Should Seattle trade him? And if so, is there a good landing spot? Signed, R. Wilson from Seattle. Oh, goodness gracious. That's obviously a fake mailbag question. That's not even funny. Breech. Ryan, first of all, what's up? Second of all, Russell Wilson.
I'll let Breech go first because anytime Russell Wilson comes up, he is undoubtedly going to interrupt us with some dumb questions about having babies. So Breech, go ahead.
What? You know what? I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to dive right into this because this is nuts. This is absolutely crazy. You know, the latest report here is from Adam Schefter, and Russell Wilson's agent came out and said, hey, look, I haven't made a trade demand. Russell's not demanding a trade, but if you do want to trade him, can you please send him to Dallas, New Orleans, Las Vegas, or Chicago? Which also sounds like a nice bachelor party group there. You go to Vegas or New Orleans, that would be fun. That's interesting. That kind of screams like all these teams need to call Seattle right now and get a deal done because Russell Wilson doesn't want to be in Seattle anymore. And obviously, you know, let's give all credit where it's due. Jason Lockenford, our very own CBS Sports NFL insider, was the one who kind of broke all of this on Super Bowl Sunday saying, hey, watch out, a Russell Wilson trade could happen this offseason. There were a lot of raised eyebrows saying, wait, what? Russell Wilson? And then Russell Wilson went on his publicity tour. I think he even went on Ellen, and he was throwing the Seahawks under the bus anywhere and everywhere he could. And so now this is where we are, and this is not a good situation. I feel like a trade is looming. What say you guys?
Wow. A trade is looming.
JLC said that at Super Bowl. You weren't listening. And then
No. I mean, JLC has been at the forefront of this. And, you know, he had a report before Russell Wilson came out and said something, JLC was out there with reports saying that his camp wasn't happy. So, I mean, I get it. Like it's a real thing, but what on earth are the Seahawks? I mean, what do they have to get back to trade Russell Wilson? Like,
well, the first question is how do we get here? And the Athletic had a long involved article on Thursday morning, about exactly how we got here. And a lot of it had to do, and Russell basically said as much. JLC reported, and then he went on Dan Patrick, Russ did, and said, I don't like getting hit 4 million times a season. Basically saying the offensive line needs to be better. And I don't think he was calling out his teammates per se. He was telling the front office and Pete Carroll, you need to make it a priority to try to keep me safe. And he also wanted the offense to run through him. He was frustrated that after the first half of the season where we couldn't quit talking about how Russ was on his way to winning an MVP, had a couple of bad games. And then Pete Carroll basically said, according to the Athletic, let's shut it down. We're going to run the ball. That's what I like to do. And I think Ross Tucker, a former NFL player who has a podcast, the Ross Tucker Podcast, tweeted this out on Thursday.
Friend of the podcast, Ross Tucker.
And well, I don't know if he has announced that you got fired, but he tweeted this out and I don't disagree with it. If I'm having given a choice, I'm firing Pete Carroll long before I'm trading Russ Wilson.
I'll chime in on that one because I don't think it's as simple as a Pete Carroll versus Russell Wilson thing. I think it's Russell Wilson versus the front office and the coaching staff. Because look, you have part of Russell Wilson is he's not happy with the offense. He let Russ cook. Let me throw the ball 70 times a game. Let me win these games for us. So that's him against the coaching staff. The other part here is that he wants to help pick personnel. He wants to help handpick players that he wants to play with. And so now you're stepping on John Schneider's toes. So it's a matter of, do you keep Russell Wilson over John Schneider and Pete Carroll, or do you dump him? And in that situation, that's a little bit more dicier.
Well, so let's point out too, and by the way, this athletic story from Michael Schallendugger, Mike Sando, and Jason Jenks, really well researched, really well written, really well sourced. It's awesome reporting, and it's got a ton of huge nuggets in it. I mean, based on that, they lost to the Bills on November 8th, and Wilson had 4 turnovers. So Carroll, quote, pulled back the reins on Wilson in the offense, and you couldn't tell, but it was effectively a rebuke of Wilson, and sources close to the quarterback said it upset him. A week later, Wilson had the worst game of the season, turning the ball over 3 more times in an ugly 23-16 loss to the Rams. Carroll wanted to be more careful with the offense. Wilson wanted to stay the course, trusting in himself. Before the Thursday night game against Arizona, Wilson met with his coaches for some time. Wilson has sought, even pushed for influence within the organization regarding scheme and personnel. In the meeting, he outlined his own ideas for how to fix the offense. His suggestions were dismissed, multiple sources told The Athletic. Another reminder to Wilson that the Seahawks did not see him the same way he saw himself, a player who had earned greater control over his situation, his future, his legacy. He stormed out of the room. That's crazy to imagine, thinking that happened in the middle of the season last year. It makes more sense. The season makes more sense when you think about how this unfolded, though, right? Like, the Seahawks kind of spiraled and they really stumbled down the stretch in the middle of the season. They looked like one of the best teams in football, at least one of the best offenses in football. And so now Russell Wilson has gone passive aggressive on the Seahawks, and he's taking it publicly. And that's when things,
I think he's gone aggressive.
No, but like, he didn't aggressive is going and talking to Schneider again and saying it. This makes sense though, why it gets leaked to JLC, why you see him going on Dan Patrick, because he's gone to the Seahawks and he said, hey, here's what I want. I want control over this and this and this. And the Seahawks said no. So I guess that's the next question, Ryan, unless you want to add something to how we got here, but should the Seahawks acquiesce to Russell Wilson's personnel and scheme demands?
Well, that's up to, as Breech noted, John Schneider and Pete Carroll. It's also worth noting, I mean, we're not blaming the front office and the coaching staff, but it's also worth noting that I don't know if Russ Wilson is innocent in all this.
I don't think so at all.
In the Athletic story, it talks about him being really concerned with his legacy as it compares to Brady and Manning. Montana, I think, was mentioned. He was tweeting one of his friends, I think, I'm not sure where, or a high school friend, whatever, one of his buddies that's not involved in football now, during the Super Bowl, because he was sitting in the box right next to Roger Goodell. We saw him, about how angry he was to see Tom Brady out there and him not being out there. And I get that on some level, but it's not weird. But I would imagine when Russ came out of Wisconsin, these weren't the thoughts in his mind. His thought process as a 3rd-round pick was making the team, doing all he can to help the team get better. And now it seems like it's more than that. And look, he's one of the best players in the NFL, and he has every right to have a say to a certain extent about how things are going to go. But we called out Aaron Rodgers when it seemed like when he ran Mike McCarthy out of town, there were folks that certainly were down on Aaron Rodgers about that. Turned out he was right. And also when he seemed a little, I don't know if he was petulant, because I think that's too strong a word, but when it seemed like he and Matt LaFleur Breech Jr. weren't on the same page in year one, and then they had 2 really, really good seasons. And no one now faults Aaron Rodgers, by the way, for the way the season ended this year when LaFleur got conservative in the playoffs and they lost the game. So I don't know. I think Todd Furman, our buddy, who is one of the best odds, he used to be an odds maker and one of the best sort of gambling dudes on the internets. He just tweeted this out, and I think this actually is pretty good. He goes, this is telling your current partner, he's talking about Russ Wilson, naming those 4 teams, according to Schefter, Cowboys, Saints, Raiders, Bears, as possible trade destinations if he were to be traded. Not that he's asking for a trade, but Todd Furman tweets, this is like telling your current partner, I'm happy in the relationship, but if these 4 people were available, I might leave you. This always seems to end well. And I think that's where we're at. It's not as bad as Deshaun Watson. I don't even think it's in the same area code, but it ain't great.
Well, I think it's different than Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson, signed up, was drafted by this organization as a first-round pick, signed on to this long-term extension, thinking that the organization had a vision for how they were going to handle things. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, whoa, like this is, and I did want to say and who the general manager was. Russ wants to draft players and design schemes.
We don't know that.
I mean, that's what the report is.
He doesn't want to draft players. I don't think that was in there, that he wants to.
He wants to say in the personnel. So he wants to say in what players are going to end up on the team. You can, whether that's draft or free agency, he wants some say in what's going to happen. And I think one interesting thing here is that, he went on that media blitz that we talked about where he kind of threw the team under the bus. And here we are in this report from The Athletic. This clearly is information that came from the team, saying, hey, Russell Wilson was in this meeting. That's an information that few people would have. And you go back and they mentioned that it was that Thursday night game in week 11. Well, what was happened right before week 11 is the Seahawks had lost 3 of 4 games letting Russ cook. He's starting to burn in the kitchen and they're like, maybe he needs some help. Let's send a fire extinguisher in there. So he starts pouting like a 3-year-old is what the Seahawks made it sound like. And they put their foot down saying, look, we're in control here and we're going to do it our way. And what happens when they do it their way? The Seahawks close the season 6-1 by sticking to the plan of the coaching staff. So if you're the Seahawks front office, what you're seeing is, look, we did it our way. Our way went 6-1. Russ's way lost 3 of 4 in the middle of the season. We gave him his chance. And so you have no reason to kind of give in and let Russell Wilson do whatever he wants. So I do think that this.
Russ's counter argument would be, if we had an offensive line, then we could continue to do what we did over the first 6 weeks.
I don't really buy the whole we don't have an offensive line thing. I mean, I get that it's not the world's greatest offensive line, but have you
seen the advanced metrics on the offensive line?
What are the advanced metrics?
They're not great.
Is it their pass blocking rate or their run blocking rate? Like, what are we?
I think in the Athletic a few years ago when Russ got hurt, remember he had that ankle injury? That may have been like 2016. I think it was rated last or bottom 5 or something according to PFF. I haven't looked specifically, but I'll look at it while you're talking.
I mean, they've been better.
I'll give you the number right now. In 2020, the final PFF offensive line rankings for the entire NFL, the Seahawks unit ranked 14th overall, not even in the bottom half of the league.
Yeah, I mean, and you can point out sacks, but like half of the sacks are because Russ holds the ball too. Look, I'm a huge Russell Wilson guy. I have been since he was NC State. Like, I'm pro Russell Wilson. I think he's a total weirdo and does some very bizarre things, including this. But to me, this feels petulant. And you've won a Super Bowl there. It's not. I mean, the athletic article is like, he hasn't been to the NFC Championship game since 2014. Yes, there are things the Seahawks could have done better. But do you remember that Sports Illustrated article after the interception by Malcolm Butler and everything fell apart, and it was like Pete Carroll took Russ's side? I mean, maybe we sort of glossed over the possibility that Russell Wilson was pretty involved in the division of and trying to take the leadership from Richard Sherman, from Bobby Wagner, and that he believed it was his team. And so now, he thinks this is his team more so than Pete Carroll and John Schneider. Like, it wouldn't be shocking if somebody like a guy like Russell Wilson, who is so laser focused in building out his lifelong brand, were adamant that he is the most important part of everything and that he needs to have a say-so in everything, right? I mean, that's not crazy.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And quickly, Football Outsiders had the Seahawks adjusted sack rate, the offensive line, in terms of how they protect Russ. They ranked 30th, better only than Debo's Eagles and Houston Texans. But to your point, so we could say the same thing about Tom Brady. They got AB because he wanted him. They got Gronk because he wanted him. Same thing about Aaron Rodgers. But they don't listen to Aaron Rodgers. They just keep drafting running backs and quarterbacks. So I think you can say that anyway. Ben Roethlisberger to some degree. So I don't think it's necessarily unique to Russ, but I don't disagree that, look, man, I'm not giving any player personnel control. I mean, that's not your job.
Right. That was the original question. Like, what do you ask? What do you want, Russ?
Like, and look, we only know what's.
But that's where you make one of those demands that's impossible to meet, and then you're not going to meet that demand. Well, then get rid of me.
Well, let me ask you this, though. What's worse? Because personally, I have no issue with Deshaun Watson saying, "Hey, can you interview what's his name from the Kansas City Chiefs for me, please?" Just because Patrick Mahomes recommended him, you don't have to hire him; just interview him. What's his name? What's the
Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah,
Eric Bieniemy.
Like, I don't have any issue with that. And Calvin Harris still said, no, I'm not going to do it in so many words. I do have an issue with Russ Wilson if this is actually what happened, saying, I want these offensive linemen and these tight ends or whatever.
Well, and Russell Wilson asking for personnel control would be like me telling Brinson, give me $80,000 or I'm quitting the podcast. You know, like Brinson's going to be like, okay, bye. You know,
Yeah,
like,
see ya.
I'll give
Yeah.
you 80,000. That's how ridiculous Wilson's demand sounds, because no matter how good of a quarterback he is, you can't expect to just get some sort of personnel control and take that from the general manager and the head coach.
And are you going to really roll into the, like, in week 8 and be like, hey, by the way, trade deadline's coming, or, you know, we got to talk about the draft. It's like, hey, Russ, or like, maybe if you want to work with scheme stuff, I get it. And I do understand that there's an inherently conflicting nature. And this is where I think it's really important to read between the lines on this athletic piece, because Mike Sando covered the Seahawks and covered the NFC West for a really long time. And the guy, you know, these guys know Pete Carroll. He has been there for a long time. And when they say that Pete Carroll, and we all know Pete Carroll loves to run the ball, but they're like, it's in his bones. That is, it runs through him, the desire to, you know, be a run first defense team with explosive downfield shots. And, you know, maybe that's why they have to be headed for a divorce, because if Pete Carroll is going to stay, and Pete Carroll has just about as much power as any coach in professional football, with Paul Allen now, you know, gone, and John Schneider technically they're joined at the hip, but Pete Carroll is the guy in charge. With all those factors in play, maybe a trade is imminent. I don't know that it works, though, because the Russell Wilson is now saying he would only be traded to 4 teams. Those 4 teams.
He has a no trade clause too, by the way.
Yeah. Those 4 teams per Adam Schefter, or I guess via his agent was like, Russ has not requested a trade, but if he did, here are the 4 teams he would go to: Las Vegas, Chicago, Dallas. And then who's the 4th one?
New Orleans.
It's a fascinating list, because they're all big markets, or at least feel like bigger city markets. And I think that's important to Russell and Ciara. Vegas, I think they would eat up. And you also have,
but one of the issues was when we heard about this initially, that, he wants to go to New York because Ciara's music career can take off there. Her music career ain't taking off in Dallas. So I don't know if that has anything to do with those initial reports.
I think I'm the quarterback of the Cowboys, and then
Russell Wilson's marketing money is going to shoot up 1,000% if you're the quarterback of America's team, and if the Cowboys are good. So I think the team that makes the most sense, probably the Cowboys and the Raiders, only because I don't think the Seahawks are going to make a trade unless they get a quarterback in return, because Pete Carroll's 69. He turned 70 in September. He doesn't have time to sit around 5 years and draft a quarterback and rebuild the franchise. So if he could get Derek Carr in return, I'm sure the Seahawks would be happy with Derek Carr, because he's the one quarterback in the NFL who do exactly what the coaching staff wants them to do. So Pete Carroll will be out there like, oh, good, nice check down, Derek. That's exactly what we wanted. And then obviously,
Derek's like, all of a sudden Pete Carroll walks out of his house to get his newspaper, and Derek Carr like pops out of the bushes like, "Hey Pete, just moved in next door." He's like, what are you doing, bro?
I will say, his house in Vegas to Russell Wilson.
I think I agree with you, Breech, but I wouldn't rule out the Saints, but they are so cap strapped and they have later picks that I don't know that you're going to see them do that. So, and Jameis Winston's a free agent. They have Taysom Hill. I think Sean Payton would love to work with Russell Wilson, and if they can find a way to make it work, they probably will. And my goodness gracious, would that be like, what a combo that would be. I think the Bears, I don't think the Bears have the assets or the maneuverability to do it either. And I'm not sure
these is not like the other. Like, why are the Bears on this list? That's just weird.
Well, I think that's because Russell Wilson's staring at the team and saying that team is a quarterback away. That's clearly how he feels about that roster. I want to build these rosters on my own. Looked at that one and said, all right, well, if they had a competent quarterback, they could win in the playoffs. Yeah, I don't think any of these teams are out of the question ridiculous. But Brinson, you just mentioned the Saints. They just don't have the money. It's hard to see them pulling it off. I think the Raiders could, just because you throw Derek Carr in. and a couple draft picks. And then the Cowboys could, if they could figure out some sort of sign and trade with Dak Prescott. And also they have the most cap room of the 4 teams on this list. But the other thing is, if the Seahawks were to trade them, they would take a $39 million dead cap hit. And I'm not sure any team can afford to take that in 2021, where the salary cap is going to be barely 180 million.
By the way, we talk about Russ and leverage and whether he should be mandating all these things. Allegedly, he won the last stare off, because remember he said, if you guys don't give me that long-term deal, I'm walking. And at the 11th hour, they paid him to be the highest paid
deadline.
That's right, the April 15th deadline. I think it was April 15th. So he had to do his taxes just in time to get paid. So it was a perfect timing for him. But the point is that he won the first airing contest, and so he has some experience doing it, and maybe that's why he feels emboldened, assuming he feels that way, to ask for more or whatever he thinks is best for interest for him and the team.
I mean, I think the Raiders obviously you have to deal with going to the same division as Patrick Mahomes.
Their defense sucks. Their defense is dog do, and
he would be awesome.
And is their offensive line any better than the Seahawks offensive line?
It was the big issue they had last. That's right. The defense.
Wait, don't they have Tom Cable, who they fired from Seattle because he couldn't protect Russell Wilson?
I don't know if going to Las Vegas is going to change anything. And I mean, look, if you can't get along with Pete Carroll, who's super excitable, although he does let them run the ball, is John Gruden going to be your guy? Because I don't know.
Maybe he just needs that mentality change. Like Brady wanted, leave the Belichick, I have my hands, I absolutely control everything. Go to Arians, who's like, yeah, if you want to get drunk the night before the game, do it. Like Arians is so carefree, and maybe that's what Russell Wilson needs, going from Pete Carroll to a guy like John Gruden.
Dallas makes a ton of sense. If Jerry Jones doesn't want to pay Dak Prescott,
he's going to pay this guy. I mean, what are we doing?
Well, I'll just say that if you trade for Russell Wilson, so if the Cowboys or any other team does, you only owe him 3 years, $70 million. So you owe $23.3 million over the next 3 years. I mean, that's a bargain compared to giving.
He said in the Atlantic thing, and I think we've heard him say before, he wants to play 10 to 15 more years. I would imagine once he arrives, it's going to be a very short time before he wants to get paid $40 million or whatever.
I think he plays at least one more season under his current contract.
I would agree with that.
That's still a deal, because you're paying him only 23.3 for that one season, or 19, I think, is his base salary for 2021.
It's crazy that we're seeing a guy like this with the success he's had on that franchise demanding out. Like, I mean,
whoa. He's not demanding.
All right. He's not requesting a trade. Sorry.
But he's not demanding. I mean, Deshaun Watson, I feel like, is demanding based on the circumstances, of which I totally agree with.
I mean, but is it Russ saying, like, either give me personnel control or trade me? I mean,
according to the Athletic
if you're the team that's trading for him, you now have to give him personnel control, right? Or
I don't know.
Maybe I just think it's the thing with the personnel control too is, so you're the Seahawks, you get through free agency and Russell Wilson's still on your roster. You get to the draft, Russell Wilson's still on your roster. All of a sudden you show up to mandatory minicamp. And what if Russell Wilson hates all his new teammates? Now there's a bigger rift between if you would have let me pick these guys, I would have liked them. They would have been good. And now you brought in these guys I don't like, and that makes things worse. So I don't see how this can get any better.
Also, it feels like if you're dating someone and you want to break up, you're like, listen, I'll stay with you, but you got to buy me a new Jaguar. And that's basically Russ is saying, I need personnel control. I need to get traded. Like, I don't care. And then the problem is when she shows up with the Jaguar, what do you do then?
You
drive it around for a little bit.
Well, I mean, I still think John Schneider's not going to give him personnel control. I mean, nobody else,
he blinked at the salary thing.
No one else. And the only example of anyone in the NFL doing this is Tom Brady with the Buccaneers. And that's just an unprecedented situation where a 43-year-old Hall of Fame quarterback, the greatest quarterback to ever play the game, maybe the greatest player in NFL history, probably the greatest player in NFL history, became a free agent, signed in Tampa Bay. And they had like two chill bros running and Jason Light and Bruce Arians, who were willing to chat with Tom about it because they wanted to pick his brain. It's just,
I would guess, and I have to go back and look, and you guys may remember better than I do, but I would guess that Elway and Peyton probably had a similar type deal.
I think that Peyton's a good call. I think Peyton attracted players, and Elway would say, hey, who do you want? Yeah, but this is also, I've talked about this before. When you are drafted by an organization, and you grow up, you spend your entire career in a certain organization, inherently they are going to view you as the guy that they drafted, not the guy that they brought in as this big ticket free agent. The Seahawks aren't going to just magically turn personnel control over to Russell Wilson. Like, all right.
Yeah, it feels like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are on the exact same page in the sense that they just saw Tom Brady win the Super Bowl with a hand-picked team. Like, hey, let's put all these offensive weapons around Brady. And Wilson and Rodgers are both thinking, okay, why can't we do that here? Why can't I get the guys I want? If the Buccaneers can do it and win a Super Bowl in that same season, why can't we do it where I am? And so it seems like that's why they want the control. I want to get these superstars in here so I can start winning like Tom Brady.
Let me ask you guys this. So let's set the odds on Deshaun being traded and Russ being traded. Make those odds, Brinson.
I'll say that you want odds or you want like percentage chance?
I think the percentage chance
over under percentage chance.
All right. So over under
for Deshaun, for me, it's 65.
I was going to say 65 too.
All right. For Russ,
65.
Russ, I say, let's do Russ real quick. Russ, I say it's 35.
I'll take the over on both.
I was going to say the exact same numbers as you did. I mean, like, no lie. I mean, I think Deshaun
tacos. That's what you're thinking right now. Tacos. Tacos. I like the over for Deshaun and the under for Russ. I don't think Russ is going anywhere. I just think he's blowing off steam.
I don't think the Seahawks have to feel like they've got a Super Bowl caliber team.
That's right. And I mean,
the Texans don't. No. The other thing too is like, I mean, now what I think is interesting is, could you do a tag and trade of Dak Prescott for Russell Wilson? I don't.
Breech knows the math on that, but I will say this quickly. I feel like, and this was mentioned in The Athletic, and I think this is something that you talk about Russ being like a weird robot type guy. He's like, Tom Brady and Derek Jeter and those guys. His legacy is a big deal to him. He ain't sitting out. Like, that tarnishes what he wants to accomplish. Deshaun, I feel like, would sit out if he has to deal with Cal McNair and Preacher Man, Jack Easterby.
Whoa.
Wait, Russell, Brinson, were you suggesting a tag and trade with Dak?
Wait. Russell Wilson would have a $58 million dead cap charge.
Well, tell it to Breech.
Where'd you get 39 from?
He made it.
Where'd you get
58 from Spot Track?
And Breech. You have to minus his base salary because the other team would be paying that. That dead cap includes the Seahawks paying his base salary.
You just got dunked on by someone.
No, I'm not dunking. I'm just looking.
He said minus. You have to minus.
So if the Seahawks cut him, they would owe the cap hit would be $58 million because he's owed $19 million in guaranteed money for 2021. But if another team is paying that, it becomes $39 million.
Oh yeah. I was looking on their cap table, not their yeah.
You just got Randy Bullock.
Well, a pre. Oh, I hit the wrong thing there too. Whoops. Yeah, 39 million. You're right. All right, my bad.
If you were GM, you would be Freddie Kitchens. He's hitting the wrong button, overpaying guys by $400 million.
Well, I was looking at the Seahawks salary cap table to try and see how much space they had.
I didn't even look at that. I just let
and I think that Brinson mentioning the post June 1st thing that you're about to mention, I think splits it up. So it's 13 million 1 year and 26 million the next year, which is absolutely doable. And the reason that's interesting, because your first thought is there's no way he's still be on the roster in June. You have to do a trade before free agency because you have to know where you are. But a trade would work with a team like the Cowboys, because if they're trying to negotiate with Dak Prescott on the franchise tag extension, they have till July. So that would give the two teams another 4 months to work something out. So it's not completely implausible that you could do a trade after June 1st.
That's a great point. Nobody else you're trading after June 1st because everyone else will solve their quarterback issues. But if Dak is holding out into June and Russ is still mad into June, maybe you make that swap in the before the deadline to sign somebody to a long-term extension. So that would be creative. And look, Carlos Dunlap right now counts $14 million against the salary cap. So you can cut him and no dead money. There's wiggle room here for the Seahawks, who already have $11 million in salary cap space. But this is not the time to be taking on a $39 million dead cap charge because you can't work it. Although one could argue that Dak Prescott's a better long-term asset than Russell Wilson. Just because if you factor in age. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk some Deshaun Watson and what his future holds. All right. 5-star review from Balial via Apple Podcasts. He says, loved the podcast. Been listening to you guys since 2018 when I had a 2-hour daily commute to work. You guys are fantastic. Thank you. For next week's mailbag, though, the statement was made that if Deshaun Watson goes to the Panthers this week, they're a 10-win team. We can assume the trade would include a 2021 number 8 overall, 2 future firsts, Teddy Bridgewater, Brian Burns, and potentially another defensive starter. We already saw Watson with a garbage defense go 4-12. The Panthers without Brian Burns have a garbage defense. If the Panthers make that trade and go 4-12 or worse, do you think Rule is still around next year, especially considering they'd have no picks for multiple years? So I think that is more than the Panthers would have to give up to get Watson.
I think so too, just based on sort of what we think. And even no matter if they get 0-16, Matt Rule's not going anywhere. I think he signed a 6-year deal
Correct.
for $4 billion.
I think he signed a 7-year deal.
Jeez. For 5
and David Tepper is a billionaire, but he is not going to throw away $44 million by firing Rule after 2 years.
So I think they're safe, but right. I agree. I don't know if they give up Brian Burns and potentially another defensive starter. But I think 3 first-round picks, and it may actually be less than that because you have the number 8 overall pick. This isn't like you're picking 31st or something. So number 8, maybe 20, maybe you get a second round this year and maybe a first and second next year or something. Like I would do 2 1s and 2 2s for Deshaun Watson.
Especially if one of them is 8th overall.
If you're the Panthers or if you're the Texans?
If you're the Panthers, I would give.
All right, well, let's say you're the Texans, I'm the Panthers. I'm going to offer you my first round pick this year, number 8 overall. My first round pick next year, TBD. Brian Burns, Teddy Bridgewater, and a future second round pick for Deshaun Watson. Do you take it?
I'm thinking about it. I mean, obviously it depends on what other people are, but I'm not hanging up the phone.
Yeah.
If you're offering me at any point 3 first round picks and one of them includes 8th overall, I'm probably
two first round picks.
Right. I know you're not, but if
Brian
the offer is
Burns,
right. If the offer is just 3 first round picks and a quarterback, so I have someone who can play quarterback, so Teddy Bridgewater, I'm taking it. You know, like if there's 3 first round picks, mention this deal at all, and any other player, Deshaun's gone.
I mean, and not only that, I know the salary. I mean, the draft losing draft picks is a thing, but I don't know if anyone's done the study. I'm sure they have somewhere, but I feel like the Panthers have a ton of cap space, $37 million when you count everybody. I feel like you probably have more success signing the second tier free agents than you do drafting guys in rounds 2, 3, and 4 in terms of them having an impact. It's going to cost you a little more, but if you have salary cap space, you can still fill those holes in the roster at a slightly higher rate, I would imagine. Maybe you hit on 40% of your second, third, fourth round picks and hit on 45 to 50% of the free agent signings. But my point is that just because you don't have draft picks doesn't mean you can't build a roster.
I think the lesson I would take if I was the Texans is that
don't hire Jack Easterby.
No, that and this is sort of the lesson the Panthers have to think about. The Texans got to where they are by trading away all their draft picks for like guys that they thought could help them out. And it didn't work out. So if you're Carolina, I do think you have to be careful about that. To the point of the mailbag question that, yes, if you trade Brian Burns, your defense could suck. And what if Deshaun Watson gets hurt? What if Deshaun Watson takes some time to acclimate to the system in Carolina? You know, there's a whole range of outcomes where you don't end up being a playoff team. And that's what you have to be careful about, because you could end up giving away a pick next year that's in the top 5. And that the Texans have done that twice, right?
Scared money don't.
Well, even if top 15, because like you're playing in the same division as the Super Bowl champions. If the Saints have a decent quarterback, that's a pretty solid roster. All of a sudden, you're staring at 3rd place in your division, even with Deshaun Watson. And if you don't make the playoffs, you're likely picking in the top 15. So now you gave up the 8th overall pick and, So
wait a second though. You guys are talking like crazy people. So you give up the 8th overall pick and you have Deshaun Watson, or you keep the 8th overall pick. You're finishing better than you would with Deshaun Watson?
Oh, no, I absolutely still acquired Deshaun Watson at all costs. I'm just saying that if you're the Texans, you should be thinking, if I'm getting 3 first-round picks from the Panthers, these could all 3 be top 15 picks.
Okay.
So,
sure.
Like if you're trading with the Seahawks,
Right.
you're afraid that the Seahawks are probably going to make the playoffs, going to be low first-round picks. And so that's a little worrisome. But with the Panthers, you're like, this could really work out in my favor.
I retract my previous.
Yeah, I mean, the point being, so yes, Carolina could stink. The picks could be good, but no, Matt Rule will not get fired for that. And let's not forget that if this decision to go after Deshaun Watson is made, it's not Matt Rule. It's not all on Matt Rule. Now he will have a ton of say in it, but it'll be Matt Rule. David Tepper is the one pushing aggressively for this quarterback.
Who's the new GM?
Oh God, what is their GM name?
I
thought about this the other, Scott Fitterer.
Fitterer. Okay.
I thought about this the other day. I know. I feel like this offseason, the GM and head coaching movement feels so much.
The head coaches I actually remember this year, but the GMs
the GMs just feel they feel different. But so Scott Fitterer clearly has input on this. He's the GM. But I'm telling you, David Tepper is the one pushing for the Panthers to be aggressive and acquire a quarterback. He sees a Wild West market unlike anything we've ever seen before, with quarterbacks trying to move into different locations. They tried to get in on Stafford. They want in on Watson. I think they'd love to get in on Russell Wilson, but for whatever reason, Russell Wilson doesn't want to come to North Carolina.
And you know what's funny about that? You know where Scott Fitterer spent the past 20 years of his life?
Seattle.
In Seattle.
Yeah. I mean, there's a deal that could be. I think Carolina is a spot where Russell would consider.
Didn't put it on the list.
Didn't put it on the list. Call up his agent, tell him to put Carolina on the list.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't see Matt Rule getting fired no matter what. Good news needed. Whoops. Anonymous Daniel says, please say something nice about the Texans that is not sandwiched between examples of how awful they are. Tough time to be a Houston sports fan right now. Somebody else want to start here? I don't really can't think of anything.
Yeah. I'll say this. I think the Texans fans that we know are awesome people. Steph Stradley, who we've known for 15 years now, Brinson, who is a lawyer, but she worked at Fan House back in the day when we were there, and she writes for the Houston Chronicle, smart. Lance Zierlein, our guy, was an Oilers fan before he became a Texans fan. All smart, all passionate, all want the organization not to suck. So that's one nice thing I can say about it. About the team itself, I love what's Reed's first name, the safety? I love him out of Stanford.
The nice thing I will say is that despite their 4-12 record, they were fun to watch at times. And this is coming from someone who's in Nashville and watched them play the Titans twice. Those were two of my favorite games of the season. Actually involved the Texans. Two of probably my top 20 games. Both of them, the Texans-Titans games, were both in the top 20.
You have delicious breakfast tacos in your city.
That's true.
All right, let's see who else is on this roster, because we do spend a lot of time. I mean, it was dunking on Bob, and then, it turns out he wasn't even the top two biggest concerns for that organization.
I mean, Texans fans would love to rewind to last offseason and have.
Don't do it. You can't say anything negative. This is happy thoughts only. Happy thoughts only, Brinson. You cannot mention the fact they don't have any salary cap space or draft picks. Don't mention any of that. Happy thoughts only.
I do think that there's a chance. So, like, Nick Caserio to me is a guy who's gotten kind of an unfair shake of things. Like, he just took a job. He didn't plot.
That's not even nice. You're just sort of making.
No, but I'm saying that, like, this guy worked with Bill Belichick for a long time.
Say something nice.
I am. I'm saying, what if Nick Caserio is an awesome general manager and
That's
he's in charge?
You're speculating. Say something nice about the current roster.
About the current roster? Deshaun Watson could fetch the requisite number of picks to create a full-blown rebuild that could change the trajectory of Houston sports.
Well, I thought you could say humankind.
No.
They hired Lovie Smith. He's a nice guy.
Lovie Smith has a tremendous beard.
He has a great. Oh my gosh.
I hope he still has it. What is Jordy Tennis? What is Brinson going to do with his $80,000 DFS winnings? Endless.
So explain how you got the money, because there was some concern about it, because we mentioned a few times that people were not certain how you got it.
Well, we were making jokes about the specific amount of $80,000 without. We assume that everybody listened to the one podcast where we explained how Brinson got the money. And then we've continuously been making a running joke, and people were like, why do they keep talking about 80,000? Was there like a ransom or something? Like, what the hell happened?
That would be the smart guess.
Yeah.
Well, I entered a PGA DFS contest and did really well. And that's how I got
$15 entry fee. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I mean, I won another like $5,000 contest. Like all told, I think I won like 85 something.
No one cares about the $5,000 when you win.
I know, right? People are like, I toss that on. People are like, oh, who do you care? I finished first in that one and won $5,000. Anyway, yeah, just did a PGA DFS, finished second place and cash big. In fact, I think my dad found out while listening to you guys do a podcast. I just hadn't had a chance to talk to him and tell him. Like,
that's hilarious.
He's like, "What are you gonna name your horse?" So I was like, "What?"
All right. So what are you doing with the $80,000?
I'm buying new golf clubs and taking my wife on an anniversary trip.
Where are you going?
That's what's left over after the Wilson tattoo. And also, I heard from a source that you were going to buy Annabelle a nicer stroller. So you have to put those two things on your list.
Okay. Yeah.
And by the way, this tattoo is going to be 5 figures. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
Hey, Brinson, what is your handicap? You mentioned golf all the time. This is from Michael Scott. Love Michael Scott.
Before Brinson answers the question, I think we should point out that whatever he says, it will be double that number.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
But why would I lie about my handicap? You get strokes when you do your handicap.
I think you don't want to be a 30 handicap. I mean, you'd rather be a 4.
Yeah, I think I'm between like a 15 and 18.
That's probably
so 30 and 36.
I usually shoot about 90. If I don't break 90, I'm mad.
That's with 2 mulligans. I'll give you that.
No, just I mean it's
yeah.
And if I'm hoping that these new clubs, which I got custom fitted, will improve my game substantially. We'll see.
It won't, but I'm not gonna. You have every right to buy.
Well, I'm playing Saturday. I'll let you know how I go.
Let me know.
Terrific podcast.
One more question for Wilson, then he's got to bounce.
Okay. I love the podcast. I started listening a few years ago after hearing Brinson on the Darren Smith show in San Diego. Shout out to Darren and Marty. Darren and Marty are the best. Quick behind the curtain question. The 3 of you work for CBS Sports or the parent company. Presumably your salaries cover all of your CBS podcasting, TV hits, and writing except Brinson. You all do various hits on radio shows. Do you get paid for those hits from the station, or do you do those for free to build your brand and promote CBS Sports and the podcast, or both? Thanks. MAJSD.
I'm going to tell you a funny story. Brinson recommended me to one of his buddies. I won't name the radio station. Last spring to talk draft, and he's like, "Oh, they pay." And I do radio hits all the time. I don't get paid for any of them. Some of that.
Huh?
I don't know what you said. And some I do, like I've been doing weekly for a couple, 3-4 years now, and they're good dudes. This one I'd never done before. Really nice guys. At no point did I get paid for that. So that's just Brinson for you. But I do not get paid for any of my hits. I think Brinson probably does. Breech probably gets paid in cat food.
There's nothing wrong with being paid in cat food, Wilson. That first, I would say it depends on where you are. I think the easiest place to get paid is the Super Bowl because, most radio stations cannot send a reporter to the Super Bowl. So if you say you'll give an update.
Oh, I have done that. I forgot about that. I did that before. Sorry.
There you go, Wilson. Yeah. What? How much did you? What? Okay. So you haven't paid.
Yeah, I got paid once for Super Bowl week every day. I did it for $150, and they offered it to me. I never would have been. I'm not telling you who. I don't want you
He's got to have it for next year.
I got to pay for my beer money that week. Yeah, that happened once, but that was actually San Francisco, so it's been a while. Go ahead.
I think I got a couple that pay me, but it's like I do. You do weekly. You're expected. There's a expectation in this segment.
Paying Brinson to show up and just yell and scream about God knows what.
Well, I mean, I don't show up and I'm not like serious. I'm entertaining.
Oh, we didn't tell you this because you were in the bathroom earlier before the podcast, but Debo confirmed that me and Breech are going to get paid for having to do this podcast with you.
You are paid for doing this podcast.
No, we get an extra $20 for each show, just to
out of my pocket.
Mental anguish.
For putting up with Brinson.
Yes.
But yeah,
Debo Venmos us $20 from Brinson's account.
To answer the question, like from an industry wide perspective, and I'm not saying this applies to the 3 of us, but just generally speaking, the bigger your personal brand or whatever you want to refer to it as is, the more likely you are to be able to get paid to do radio hits.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So I mean,
and I'm the type of person that wouldn't ask either. Like I would never ask. Say, listen, I'll do it, but you have to pay me. That just seems weird to me. But
if you see somebody, I mean, like if you see Adam Schefter doing a radio hit, like on like sports, like WIP in Philly, and he's doing his weekly radio hit, and they have some sort of introduction for him, you're like, here's our weekly conversation with at ESPN, NFL insider Adam Schefter. Then there's a really good chance he's getting paid to do that.
And by the way, Tom Brady's local show, those guys are all getting paid.
Yeah.
They're not just showing up Monday morning to talk about losing.
Well, the athletes and the coaches are all getting paid for their radio shows for sure. But I'm saying that, if you see somebody doing a radio show on a regular basis, there's a decent chance that they're, once a week that they're getting paid for it. And it depends on the market. It depends on, the various factors that go into it. But yes, there are certainly some are paid radio shows, but a lot of times, and I do a lot, like there's a lot of shows I'll do that, because I like the host and like Darren and Marty send me beer to go on the show. What was that? What's that weird?
It's like getting paid, except you're being paid in beer.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Well, yeah, but like, Darren listens to the podcast. I mean, I would go on, if he didn't send me beer, I would jump on.
So Breech, have you ever been paid other than the Super Bowl spots?
I have not, but I keep my radio to a minimum. Like if somebody asked me to be on every week, I would probably think about saying something, but I don't. I try to, keep my radio to a minimum. That's it. Like I don't like to do more than say one radio hit a week. So like the first station that gets a hold of me, that's it. Then I just tell everyone else no. Gotcha. Stay hot commodity. That's how it works.
All right. On that note.
All right. That's it. That's the show. Thanks for listening. We have plenty more mailbag questions to get to. If we didn't get to yours, don't worry about it. Just make sure you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We will end up answering it. Great stuff as always, fellas. Talk to you later.